Welcome. Today I will be paraphrasing, summarizing, and sharing for the April 8th Al-Anon readings in Courage to Change and a little time for myself. We'll begin with the Serenity Prayer and 3 mindful breaths. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It may seem later than usual, but it's really not. It's not even 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just a very dark and rainy day. It's about 40 degrees and it's rainy. It's a great day to snuggle up inside, which is what I'm doing. I was preparing to go out and run errands, and then I thought, you know what? I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll take a moment and look this over. The question is, how has step 4 helped me to be more honest with myself? The passage talks about the wording in step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And this person says that it was eye-opening. They realized that they had been stuffing their hurts and their regrets and their problems into a little box and stored it deep within them. And it just kept adding up and piling up. With the help of their higher power, Al-Anon, and working the 12 steps, they can now deal with each problem, make amends, forgive, and let go. Today's reminder, we find peace when we look within ourselves and we see what we can let go of. The quote is from One Day at a Time in Al-Anon. Serenity starts with being honest with and about ourselves. So how has step 4 helped me to be more honest with myself? I think before I did step 4, I thought that, in case you haven't heard it before, I did my first step 5 with a therapist because I had been too uncomfortable of rejection to ask someone to be my sponsor. So my first step 5 was with my therapist, and that was a very, very helpful. And that helped me to get the courage to ask someone to be my sponsor, and that same person is my sponsor today, all these years later. But I think what I found in step 4 is that I'm not a terrible person. I am worthy of love, and I'm worthy of acceptance, and I am no worse or no better than anybody else. And I have still been working with those ideas all these years later, and I know them to be true. It's just that the daily application can get I want to say tricky, but it's not really tricky. It's like I just need to remind myself because I'm trying to think of how old I was. The reason why I'm trying to calculate how old I was when I did the steps is because I'm thinking I had all that time up until the time I did the steps and now the time after. And I guess my point is that it takes a long time to get rid of old habits, and old thoughts are kind of like habitual, I think, for me. It's almost like a pattern that is no longer useful. But it's great to have a thought, to question that thought, to realize that there's no way to prove that thought to be true. It's Byron Katie's work, by the way. And then to figure out what to do after that, because once I no longer have that thought, it's like, okay, now what? Because I've thought this way for such a long time, but I don't need to think it anymore because I know that I can't prove it to be true, which is glorious in the idea that, somehow I was less than. Um, it's just a false idea. Once I question it, I realize that there's absolutely no truth to it at all. And then, like I said, the challenge comes to, well, what am I going to replace that with? And where do I go from here? But that's kind of a glorious thing to have as a challenge, indeed. Much better than the weight of somehow feeling subpar. I'm going to take a minute to look this over. I'm warming up. My gosh. I was so chilly that I I was all the way bundled up, and I even knotted my hoodie. Okay, I'm gonna look this over. This passage is about dealing with the past. It's talking about examining the past can help us deal with the present. It can also help us to make changes for the future. But it's important to remember that the past is indeed over, and we are powerless to change what has happened in the past. What we can do is we can make amends if we have harmed others. We the only power we have is in the presence of this day that we're in right now. So it's saying that we face the past and then we move on. We learn from what we have experienced, but we don't let it hold us back from living here and now. Today's reminder: we try not to get bogged down with old wounds, because what we're really interested in is new growth. And the quote is by H.G. Wells. It's talking about the past being a beginning. I recently went down this, I was meditating and I got this idea, this thought, like this really clear thought and picture in my head of the place where I used to visit my grandparents in the winter in Florida. And I stopped my meditation early and I went online and I looked up the place where they lived and it was still there. And it just brought back this flood of memories. And I ended up talking to a good Al-Anon friend about it, and it ended up being kind of a beautiful thing, just kind of with the message of me being loved and protected. And that was really lovely. However, I like this reminder that, and I know this is true. I mean, I live every day of my life like this, or I try to at least, that I know that the best thing to do is to make amends if I feel like I've harmed anybody. Step 10, that brings me such freedom. It's like a breath of fresh air. Like I never have to be bogged down by that again. But there are some things in my past that I couldn't make direct amends for because of the circumstances. But what Al-Anon tells us to do is to just not make that mistake again with somebody else. And not to do what I did to harm somebody else. Don't do that again. And so I definitely practice that. And it says we can't change the fact that others harmed us. And that, that is that's a whole different ball of wax because we can't control it, but we also can't, like, there's very little we can do about it except to, like in my case, I had a stepfather who just was very inappropriate around me, and I just have to kind of find the place in my heart just to give him grace and to know that he was doing the best he could, and there's and he's not around anymore, so I'm free of that. And so I think that especially on cold, gray, rainy days, it's easy to kind of slip back into the past. But what I try to do is have a light of gratitude on it because there's always something good in the mix. And like when I look back, I feel, even though, growing up is challenging, I just feel so overwhelmingly grateful for the people in my life, the things that we did, the love that I received from so many. And that's what I tried to focus on because anything else is just taking joy from me that I don't want to surrender today. I just want to be joyful and serene and full of love and light and trust. And so that is my focus, and that's where I choose to put my energy. Close out with the serenity prayer and 3 mindful breaths. Here we go. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Sending you love. Take care.